Hello, I am Jyotika. Welcome to Excelling Psychology. In today's class, I'll be discussing paper 4 answers from consumer psychology. And no, this is not for designer study. This is for the smaller questions which come. I have taken this question from a past paper which was from the earlier syllabus. So here they've given us an abstract from Otti and Lewis and some questions are asked from the study. Now I know many students will wonder that when Otti and Lewis is not a key study, why we are practicing this? Because in the latest syllabus, key study questions are asked. In the latest syllabus, key study questions are asked first and then those are followed by other questions from other places in the book. Like for example, if we look at March 2024, in that there were questions on primacy and recency effects. The only change is that unlike here where we have an abstract which is given from the study, now they've stopped giving the abstract. Sometimes they don't name the study, but you have to know which it is. Like when primacy and recency effects on menu design were asked, you had to know that that question is coming from Dayan and Bar Hillel. So the questions very much you can practice from the past papers. You just have to be mindful of how a little tweaking will be done in the way the questions are presented and what type of questions are asked in your paper. In fact, I strongly recommend that you practice from the past papers. It's very helpful. Okay, so I'm not reading out the abstract for this very reason that now they've stopped giving the abstract in the paper, and I'm directly coming to the first question, assuming that now if these questions have to come in the paper, they'll straight off ask this question without giving any abstract. So the first question is explain what is meant by brand recognition. This is for 2 marks. Okay, I also have the answers written by one of my students, a very sincere student who's written the answers really well. So let's see how she's written, and wherever I want to add something extra or I want to show you some corrections that she needed to make, I will keep pointing out that. Okay, so what she's written is brand recognition is the extent to which consumers can correctly identify a brand based on visual indicators such as logo and colors. This is a very good definition. Still, I insist that you add to this differentiation from other brands. One part of brand recognition, if we see Otti and Lewis as well as if we see the cigarette study, Joe the Camel study, in that one also we see the Fisher one, that brand recognition, whenever it is mentioned, 2 aspects are given of brand recognition. One is to be able to identify a brand directly. Like here it's mentioned based on some brand identity like logo and colors. The other one is always the ability to be able to see the uniqueness of that brand or to be able to see how it is different from others. So I do believe that should also be mentioned in the definition. But her definition is correct. It's written well with proper use of terminology. So I would award this 2 on 2. She will get 2 on 2 in the paper. Next question is, give 2 conclusions from the study by Otti and Lewis. Okay, in the paper this time they might not ask it this way, that give 2 conclusions from Otti and Lewis, particularly because it's not a key study, but they could ask it in other ways. That's why practice is good, in the sense they could ask you 2 things that have been found from research on brand recognition, product placement, something like that. So you might be asked to indicate something like this. So first is product placement does appear to have an effect on children's consumer behavior, demonstrating the effect on implicit memory. This is a good conclusion, though I would recommend that a little more is explained on implicit memory, in the sense that whenever we use terminology, they don't separate knowledge and understanding. They want us to be able to show our understanding of implicit memory, not just knowledge. So implicit memory is memory which is automatically created, not at the will of the person, and the person themselves are not aware that that memory is there. when they have to make a choice, it just drives or motivates them to make that choice without their realization. So demonstrating effect on implicit memory, something could be elaborated a little more like which is not consciously used or which does not help to make a conscious choice, something like that. Okay, that could be mentioned. Another conclusion is explicit memory does not appear to play a part because there was no difference in choice of drink between those who accurately remembered the brand and those who didn't. It seems similar, or it seems to be a continuation of the previous, but it's not. It is absolutely acceptable as two different conclusions because the first was about implicit memory, the second is about explicit, and it is explained why explicit memory is not playing a role. So it's been dealt with as two different issues. So here what the student says is explicit memory is not playing a role because they could not remember that brand was there in the film, and that's why they're choosing it. So that is well written. What I wanted to focus on is they've asked for conclusions and she's made sure to address the conclusions. She hasn't written about the results. Many students make that error in AS and A levels both. When conclusions are asked for, like what are we interpreting or what are we understanding from this study, instead of writing conclusions, they write data, results in the form of figures. So these many children selected Pepsi, these many selected Coca-Cola. That is not a conclusion, that's just result or numbers or data that has been obtained. So when conclusions are asked for, conclusions have to be given, and here the conclusions are given very clearly that product placement or brand recognition happens at an implicit and not an explicit level. So that is the way it should be written. Again, a very good answer. Next is give two examples of what Otti and Lewis did to ensure the ethical guideline of informed consent was followed. Okay, so here the answer is that the teachers were involved because the study took place in the school. So of course it can be assumed that the teachers were willing. Like here they were approached by the head teachers and other senior staff must have decided whether it's appropriate for children in the school. Again, what I want you to notice is the student does not just leave it at the teachers knew about the study, or some students will just write it took place in the campus of the school. She goes further to show her understanding, which justifies it also that they have allotted 2 marks, so there should be some explanation of how the ethical guideline is followed, like not just stating it or naming it. Because even if we see the command term is give 2 examples. So examples means they should be properly defined. So she's saying that the teachers must be knowing about and they must have taken an active decision to allow the study to take place given whatever the nature of the study was. So she's put it in her own words, but that is to the effect that she's given it. So that's a very good way of presenting. Also look at how she has organized the answers. So that's very neat. She always keeps 2 points so clearly separate, like distinguishing them with a line in between, that it's very easy for the examiner to see that if 2 points are asked for, indeed she has covered 2 points, and very clearly where she ends one point and where she begins the next. Also she mentions that in this study in terms of ethics, parental consent was not least. Here I think mistakenly she's written least, because children would be offered soft drinks and this is not something they would do on a typical school day. Okay, so written parental consent was there in this study. It should not be not least. It should just be that was gained or was taken. Because as they have mentioned in the study also, this is not what children would usually do on their school day. So usually they would not be looking at films and having cold drinks. It was important to take consent from parents. That also they have taken in writing. So that's how another ethical guideline was followed. Again, this is very well written and the requirement is fully met of the question. So again here she scores full marks. Next is suggest one way in which this study could be unethical. So no doubt the researchers have taken care of certain ethics, especially informed consent. Yet there are some concerns when it comes to ethics. So as she has mentioned here, children who are trying Pepsi or Coca-Cola for the first time may get addicted to its taste. and that is not good for their health. Of course, your language could be a little better. Your health is not correct, their health should be there. Because fizzy drinks contain high levels of sugar. In fact, it's mentioned also in the applications of the study that because of studies like these, there is a ban on showing sugary soft drinks in children's films. Means that has been a direct application that broadcasters and the health ministry especially has understood that they shouldn't place such products in films because it targets the implicit memory, and without them even realizing or making a choice, they tend to have too many sugary drinks. This is a very good example of how you can comprehensively, first of all, study what is given in the textbook rather than just memorize, as I always say, because then you can see the links between application and ethics. So something that you've studied in application, okay, sugary drinks got a ban because of this, you're able to pick up that and cover it under ethics also. You're able to see how that is an ethical concern. Why? Because you have not learned the study just fact by fact or point by point just for the sake of scoring, but to really understand what the meaning is of that study, what it is telling you. When you've done a good understanding of the study, that is when you can produce answers like this, and becomes very easy also to write. So when I had asked this student, she told me there was no difficulty in writing these answers. She found them easy. So when you understand things, you find them really easy. Again, here answer wise, she has mentioned what is the concern. If she would have just left it at it is exposing children to high levels of sugar, again that would have not been complete and the example wouldn't have been very clear. So the fact that she mentions that they would taste it, they would get addicted, and then that would affect their health, means she's pointed out everything that is a concern here. That is why she scores full marks. Though one recommendation I would make is, whenever it comes to an ethics question, try your best to specify the ethical guideline that you are addressing in your answer. Here the ethical guideline is protection from harm. This is causing harm to children, getting them addicted, it's physical harm to their body. Because in future if they consume soft drinks, it's going to affect their health. So this all has to do with protection from harm. How I would recommend writing is first to specify that ethical guideline which is being violated is protection from harm, and then to give this explanation. But either ways, because it's very clear and it's explained very well, that is why it gets full 2 marks. This is also where I wanted to see that in my videos I use a certain approach of writing, but as I always say, it is flexible. It's up to you how you want to write. So if a student has a good style of writing, there is no compulsion that you have to follow only one way or there's a formulaic way of going about it. You can write it this way also. And the final question here is, discuss advantages and disadvantages of using interviews to investigate brand recognition in children, and you should include a conclusion in your answer. When I gave the student these practice questions, at that time only I tweaked the question according to the latest syllabus. So now how it is asked is, the 4 marker is asked as give one strength and one weakness of some research method. Here it's interview or some issue to investigate brand recognition in children. So this question I had told her to ignore it because it's according to past syllabus. Now they ask strictly for one strength, one weakness, and no conclusion is included. So the question which she's answered is this one, not the way it was phrased in the past paper. Okay, so let's see the answer. So one strength, she says, of using interviews is to investigate brand recognition, that the researchers will be able to see whether children are being honest or not through their facial expressions and body language. Now this might seem less contextualized because she hasn't specified drawn a connection between Otti and Lewis. But if we see the mark scheme for these answers, it is okay to have generic answers also. That is what it appears to be. Though still I would recommend contextualizing it. So there could be just one example, or in the wording only she could have mentioned Otti and Lewis. That would have made the answer better. So she could have said that if children were being honest or not, in the sense if they were selecting a particular drink and claiming not to remember. What they saw in the film. In that case, if they were lying, like they're saying they don't remember seeing it in the film and they are lying, in that case the researchers would have come to know from their body language. There would have been some hesitation in the way they were speaking. So that could have been given as an example, or like I said, it could have been included in the point itself. One weakness she's given is that researchers are not able to objectively analyze and interpret responses in a semi-structured or unstructured interview was conducted. It is perfectly acceptable if they ask you for interview and you take some specific type of interview and draw on a strength or weakness of that. That's absolutely fine. So she's done that here. She's made the assumption if they're using semi-structured or unstructured interview, which is the case with children, at least it'll be semi-structured. In that case, they are not able to objectively analyze the responses. So if children, actually it's more about asking open questions rather than unstructured or semi-structured. Then when there are open questions, we are not able to objectively analyze. So again, to contextualize it, let's say children are talking about which drinks they prefer in open questions, like they're answering on their own. So if they are to say something like they usually have Pepsi, the researchers might interpret it as they like Pepsi, but that's not necessarily what they're conveying. They might be just trying to say that they usually have it more, maybe because that's what their family tends to purchase, so they're more exposed to that, or maybe it's easily available near their house. So researchers might reach wrong conclusions by assuming that the children is talking about liking. These type of examples can be given for this answer, again just to contextualize it more. For the first point, I will give the student full 2 marks. It is worth 2, I'll give 2. Because like I said, though I'm finding it generic, the answer, but it is acceptable in paper 4. The second one, which is there, but provided it's well explained. Now don't think it's generic is accepted, so you just write one line and that way. You can see she's been very thorough in how she's written. That's why I'm giving her 2. If she would have just written that body language can be studied, then I would have given her 1. She has mentioned how honesty can be seen through body language and through facial expressions as well. That's why, because she's complete in her answer, in her point, I'm giving her 2. In the second paragraph, though, I'll just give her 1 mark because somewhere she's confused open questions and semi-structured and unstructured interview. So it's not that I'm not giving her marks because she's not contextualized. I'm not giving her marks because she has taken a point which is legitimate. You can give open questions as a point for interview, but she's confused between the type of interview or interview format and the question format which is there. So for some lack of understanding in research method, I have deducted 1 mark. So here she gets 3 out of 4. Usually this is the pattern with most students, not only with this one. When it comes to descriptive answers, direct answers, they're better at writing, which they've learned directly from the study. When it comes to the research methods question, it starts showing how their base concepts are not very clear. Like in this answer we saw, there is a confusion between question format and interview format. So usually there are problems when it comes to the 4 marker on research methods. So looking at this trend, after seeing so many students, I can tell you, my advice is strongly that you revise your research methods very well. That's where most students are faltering. So make sure you know strengths and weaknesses of every method correctly without confusing it with any other research method. Okay, so that is it for this video. It was just a demonstration of how you can answer some paper 4 questions. If you have any comments on this video, you can leave them in the box below. I'll return with another video. Till then, goodbye.